Hi guys, this is my Warden deck stacking Blade Flurry / Charge Dash League starter character for the 3.25 League. Just as a disclaimer, this is not a hardcore build. Warden is simply too squishy. This version has decent survivability and you won't be dying every map, but it won't be anything crazy like mana stacking Archmage or splitting Steel Trickster or anything like that. So please temper your expectations. The build starts off playing bows and axe and needs to farm around 20 to 50 chaos to hard swap into dexterity stacking at the minimum. You absolutely can play Charge Dash Blade Flurry earlier when offered to you, but you won't have much base damage or stats unless the League mechanic pops out items that have a lot of raw elemental damage. If you do, I would play Claws, right, and get accuracy and attack speed, and you'll have a decent time after you get to the first ascendancy, Oath of Spring, which has really good synergy with Blade Flurry mechanically, less so with Charge Dash, but you'll mostly probably be using Blade Flurry unless you want to embrace the meme that is Charge Dash. You want to get mainly lightning damage because it is probably the higher thing that you'll be scaling. I recommend a Trinity setup with added cold damage and some fire damage from somewhere. Try to use a claw again and use a shield so that you have decent defensives, right, going through axe. You can use any and all essences you see to make a pretty decent elemental claw while you're in axe. I do not have a leveling tree set up for melee. I am playing with the assumption that melee is going to feel really bad early because of the mana costs and all of the base damage being removed. All right, Blade Flurry lost its base damage and it's just now scaling. So because it lost all the base damage, you're going to be wanting to look for base damage in other places, similar to how a spell build plays the game. So in this regard, you should probably not play melee in axe unless you are wanting to give it a try, in which case I think it might not be the best, but it might not be that bad if the League mechanic is spitting out a whole lot of items that give you a lot of raw elemental damage items in general. So just keep a lookout on that if you want to play melee. Again, I do not have a tree for this, but I'm sure you can just follow the main tree that I have for bows and you'll probably still be fine. Obviously just not taking any of the bow stuff, but instead taking the stuff that I take during the deck stacking portion, right? Just follow that tree and you'll probably still be fine. Anyway, I'll be dual wielding Hand of Thought and Motion when I get to maps, which is a very cheap unique, or at around 10 to 20 chaos each. Maybe going up past 20, but probably like 25 or so. They offer a ridiculous amount of power, especially as a dual wielding claw, right? I'm taking the node that essentially allows me to get more benefit out of dual wielding as a claw node. So this one right here, the inherent attack speed bonus from dual wielding is doubled while wielding 2 claws is pretty good. I think it's probably one of the main reasons why I want to use this, because it does give me a solid amount of attack speed to the point where it actually feels good to play with. So the Hands of Thought and Motion are basically giving me increased dexterity, right? 24% increased, right? It's really cheap to get higher roll ones, right? I think this is probably the best part about it. It also has synergy with Fractal Thoughts, right? Another 15% increased dex if your strength is higher than intelligence. Obviously you want to get the low roll intelligent percent increases to make sure that your strength stays higher than your intelligence, but it has nice synergy there, and it gives a good amount of damage, 1% increased elemental damage per 10 dexterity, right? You end up having a decent amount of dexterity even on a lower budget, which is exactly why I am playing it like this, right? And since you're looking to stack dexterity, you're going to get a lot of raw damage, raw evasion, and accuracy, so you'll really only have to focus on getting attack speed and crit multiplier, right? This build can pretty easily get to pinnacle bosses day 1 to 2 if you're a pretty fast player, and it moves through moves to maps pretty fast. It gets maps done very, very quickly and has about 5 to 6 frenzy charges or 4 to 5 power charges, depending on if you want to push for the corruption on the helmet that I'm using, because the helmet is very cheap, right? These Fractal Thoughts, 20 chaos, you can make a lot of corruptions on these and probably even buy a corruption for like a divine for an extra power charge. It might not even be that necessary, honestly, but because you can get crit really, really easily, it might just be that you don't even get it at all, but it's an option, it's there. Also, I'm using whirling blades to move around really fast, right? So you're running through maps pretty quickly, and you're also having a pretty quick time killing mobs and whatnot, because you have a lot of base damage and a lot of built-in damage from the crit and the attack speed. It can actually take a hit because of Bark Skin, right? During the early campaign, actually just the whole entire campaign, you're not going to be taking an insane amount of high damage hits, right? There's not a lot of one shots at all. It's just a lot of chip damage. So bark skin is actually really good. And even in early mapping up until red maps, you'll probably still not be taking an insane amount of damage. You're probably not going to be worrying about one shots at all. This helps a lot. It also, every time you lose a thing, you also gain more evade, right? And this goes up to max evasion after 6 hits, right? I'm also using Wind Dancer in this setup, and honestly, Wind Dancer, if you get hit, it almost takes you to cap right there. So if you get hit again, you're basically at 95% cap, right? It's unlikely that you'll get hit, but if you do get hit, you have a lot of one-shot protection in terms of actually just getting chipped when you're mapping and whatnot, which is pretty good, right? It feels pretty nice. I'm also using Arctic Armor, and I'm dropping the Determination aura because Determination is just not, like, after the nerfs, it's just not that good. You're not even getting much armor in general, and Barkskin had its armor percent increase removed. So I think Val Arctic Armor, it has a much nicer time in this build. Also, the Val Arctic Armor one-shot button is crazy good. If you look at my effective HP, let me go ahead and move my camera down. Hold on one second. Okay, there. If you look at the effective HP, when you have Val Arctic Armor on, you're literally doubling in life expectancy, and you're getting so much one-shot protection by activating Val Arctic Armor. It's one of the strongest, less damage taken multipliers that are in the game. You're counted as frozen. I'm not sure if this actually freezes you. I haven't fully tested it, but it gives you so much damage reduction that you probably should just want this as your oh shit button. I know Molten Shell was the thing if you had a lot of armor. Val Arctic Armor is the next best thing, right? Either that or Val Blade Flurry, right? Val Blade Flurry has the modifier 50% less damage taken while channeling. So again, another source of one-shot protection. It feels really good to use because it just works off how your actual ability works. It also did get a huge buff as well, getting over 116% more damage too, just like the base gem. So activating Val Blade Flurry might actually be like incredible. It might do an insane amount of damage and feel pretty good. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. I think that either Val Arctic Armor or Val Blade Flurry are both good defensively. If you're looking for some one-shot protection, you'll have one-shot protection. So that's kind of what I'm going for there, to make sure that I don't just get one-tapped by an Uber Boss or a Shaper Slam or something like that. The other thing is it has a good amount of spell suppression off the tree pretty easily, right? I'm going for these nodes right here, and I'm going for Lucky, right? Because I'm not expecting you to have perfect gear, right? Ideally, you get spell suppression on the gear somewhere, but even without it, 100% spell suppression chance, right? You get like 5% here. You get it because you get so much from the tree. It's almost not needed on the low budget setup. I think that would do really well, even without getting spell suppression on the gear, right? With that all being said, I think in 3.25 you have access to a lot of crazy things for the build. Specifically, you'll have a lot of access to permafreeze, right? You can use this Oath of Winter, using it with the Cold Mastery here for 5% increased damage on the enemy permanently for each second they've been frozen by you. Works incredibly well on Uber bosses, right? This is basically the same value as a shock after 10 seconds, right? This is a permanent shock on an enemy for 10 seconds, which is crazy. It's really good for Uber bosses. It's really good for bossing in general, which is what I'm intending to do with this build anyway. So really good. I like it a lot. Oath of Summer is going to be pretty good, right? Because when you activate this, Avatar of the Wilds, which is giving you a ridiculous amount of damage, and you're stacking this up in about 4 to 6 seconds or so, because you have 6.2 attack speed, you're going to be getting some ridiculous amount of hard-hitting shocks, right? You're guaranteeing freeze, and you're getting higher ignites, which pair with Oath of Summer decently, right? I'm considering either using Oath of Summer or Oath of Spring, depending, or if Oath of Summer isn't that good, like if it doesn't hit that hard, I might instead go for Tinctures, right? And Tinctures might actually be pretty good. I've heard some really good things about them. It might be like crazy strong. It can actually pair really well with this build because, as you can see, I have an absurd amount of mana leech, right? And this build isn't the type of build that like has an insane amount of mana pool in general, so you might end up like just outright out regenning the mana burn rate depending on it. I would probably end up dropping the diamond flask, either that or the granite flask. I'd probably drop the granite flask, honestly, because again, like this isn't really doing too much. Like the fizz hit is only going by 300 by activating it. That's not that good, right? That's mediocre as hell. I'm not gonna worry about it that much. I'm starting off going Oath of Spring because Oath of Spring gives a lot of damage in the axe because you're gonna be using skills that attack or hit extremely fast. Getting this probably in value over 60 to 70% shock on targets if they even live that long, to be honest with you. But that's kind of the plan for that. Since I'm also running Oath of Winter, right, it not only is it good for damage if it's paired with this cold mastery, but it's also defensively insanely nice. Being able to freeze your targets is crazy good. I'm going to be using this and maybe even considering using the Eldritch Implicit for freezes are spread, specifically in the early game when I don't have a crazy amount of damage, just as an extra defensive layer. This might feel like the best while you're mapping, because permafreeze is crazy good, right? That's kind of the idea that I'm going for there, though, and hopefully it works out. I don't know how it's going to work, though. As far as defenses, like I said, freeze, really good. It'll be your saver while mapping, right? You also have immunity to freeze baseline when you're using Arctic Armor, right? Arctic Armor is very nice in the fact that because you get immunity to freeze, you don't have to worry that much about like getting killed from frozen, etc. If you get frozen, you're straight up just dead in most cases if you don't immediately take it off. So that's nice, right? Also, since bosses are getting an action speed increased threshold, right? They used to be 30% action speed, now it's up to 50%. This gets even stronger, right? I think this is actually going to be one of the best defensive mechanics that exists in the game, right? Next to the witch frozen thing, Frigid Wake, I believe. Yeah, and this isn't even guaranteed chance to freeze the enemy, right? This is only for 0.4 seconds. You're getting 2 seconds of the freeze, and it goes up higher as you do little hits, right? That's why I'm taking Winter Spirit. This gives me a little bit of cold damage, but not enough to like instantly freeze the target. It's giving me enough to just give me enough to stack up Hoarfrost extremely fast, so that when I activate Avatar, the freeze just happens. Really nice. I'll be frank, this character is not the tankiest. This Ascendancy just doesn't have access to an insane amount of life, armor, or one-shot protection, which is exactly why I'm advocating for Val Blade Flurry or Val Arctic Armor, right? It does get max suppression pretty easily, and since it's getting massive amount of dodge rating, using Arctic Armor for less damage taken for physical and fire damage while you're stationary, you're always stationary while channeling anyway, it feels not that bad, right? It has an okay 35k EHP without the guard skill. Where did I put this guard skill? Here we go. Yeah, it has an okay about 30 to 35 EHP without the guard skill, right? Which isn't terrible, right? It's not the squishiest, or it's not the tankiest, but it's not the squishiest either. And it's also mostly because I don't have Chaos Res. If I had Chaos Res, the effective hit pool for general damage would go up significantly, right? I have very little. I'm still negative in this setup, but it's not the worst, right? I've mapped with less, and this feels pretty okay. With the guard skill up, though, like, you're using casting damage taken, right? With the guard skill, shoots up to 45k, and that's without the flasks as well. That's actually, Granite Flask does actually add a bit more defensive. Probably just gonna use Granite Flask instead of Jade Flask. We'll see. Like I said, like one of these are gonna get swapped out if tinctures are actually good, and the penetration that I get from using Oath of the Summer isn't actually that good. Nothing crazy. You might get a random one-shot if you don't dodge out of the way of some abilities, but you're generally move pretty fast, so it'll be pretty easy for you to dodge out of abilities anyway. I wouldn't play this build if you're a slow reaction player or a slow clicking player, right? The gameplay itself is pretty simple. The way Blade Flurry works is you want to charge it up until until 6, and then release, right? And it takes approximately about 0.9-ish seconds to charge it up with this attack rate, right? Obviously getting faster as you get more attack speed, right? It goes up to 7.6, so this would be done in like 0.8 seconds or so. Point being that on lower attack speeds, it's basically you hold and let go after like a second or so, right? And that honestly, it might be jarring for some people, it might not be for everyone, right? But if you don't like that, if you don't like channeling skills, this build's not for you, right? If any of this hasn't discouraged you, then the build might actually be for you. It actually does pretty good damage, surprisingly. Like, it does around 3 to 4 million Shaper DPS on a lower budget, right? Even if I just don't include this at all, it's still 3.5 million Shaper DPS. If this is a 5 link, I should mention it. If this is a 5 link, and if you go for this is probably like a divine for the base, but these are really easy to craft. You're just slamming the essence that gives dexterity on this. I can't remember the name right now, but these are it's pretty easy to craft in general, this gear, once you get it. And it's also just basic gear, right? Life, resistances, dexterity, right? These rings, again, same thing. I went ahead and I've gotten these rings in like on accident in like the first hour of getting to maps. Like rings like this are really easy to get, right? There's nothing crazy. I'm not using percent dex stuff. Astramentus is probably going to be between like 5 to 40 chaos depending. Snowblind Grace 5 link is probably going to be again like 20 to 40-ish chaos. Fractal Thoughts might be 20. Hands of Thought and Motion might be 10 to 25 depending on breach in the early game, right? Nothing insane, right? This entire setup honestly might just cost you maybe a divine, maybe 2, right? Depending on how things are. I'm using careful planning. I don't have any of the super good deck stacking stuff. I don't have this jewel brutal restraint. I don't have brutal restraint here. I don't have the cluster jewel for percent dex or increased dex with 35% increased effect on a lightning or elemental damage cluster. Right, I'm grabbing very basic stuff. I'm not even using the jewel sockets, which I absolutely would be in an actual setup, but it's kind of the idea. The actual damage itself is pretty good once you like stack everything up, right? If I take a look at this unmount avatar, again, like giving me some crazy numbers, right? And that's without Scorch, right? This is 20% shock, and this is only 2 seconds of freezing, right? 15% rage because I'm also anointing the Veteran's Wrath, which is over here. This is like 2 golden oils, right? And because of that, I don't expect you to have that right away or anything like that. This is definitely expensive, obviously. This is at least 80 chaos, which is probably going to be like a over divine on league start to get 2 of these, right? Unless you're farming light and you get this pretty quickly, but I don't expect you to have this, right? I can even just do that. Right, damage is still pretty decent. This is 15% more damage, just what was being added here. But once you do get that, it's a nice source of more damage in general, right? And with rage or without rage. And as you can see, like, yeah, the damage is still pretty decent, right? 5.6 million. I did a little showcase that I'll probably cut to shortly that kind of just does everything, like from mapping. I do some mapping there, and I do I think I do a pinnacle boss just to like show what it's capable of. Keep in mind also, I don't have any of this, right? I don't have the ability to have any of this, right? And like, I'm pretty sure I did it on a Deadeye, which doesn't even get any benefits at all, which is actually like pretty crazy. Like I probably only had like 500 to 1 million DPS, which is insane when you think about, right? And it was a pretty easy fight. Right, this on day 1, day 2 DPS is really, really nice, right? This is actually like pretty solid DPS for not an insane amount going on, right? Keeping in mind, like, this is without the shock value, this is without freezing the boss, this is with no scorch stacks at all, right? In the end game POB, right, this is like actual good gear, no mage blood or anything like that, but this is with actual pretty good gear and like a genuine cluster, right? Actual good brutal restraint, which has, I think this is 20% dexterity. Oh yeah, I dropped this note, so it's 15% dexterity. And obviously get squishier, right? I went for a squishier thing because I was like, I'm going for damage, right? 20 million DPS, and this is without Unbound, this is without Rage, this is without seconds of freeze and shock being high, right? If I obviously wanted to add that stuff, like I can show you, goes up considerably, hitting almost 70 million DPS, right? It goes up considerably when all your buffs are actually active on the target, right? And I'm still not even using like the best value for these. I know for a fact that I get way higher value on both of these, right? Which is pretty fucking strong, right? It's actually like insanely strong in general. You're probably going to be killing Ubers with zero issue, frankly. And you still have the one-shot protection with Val Blade Flurry or Val Arctic Armor, right? Either or works, but this is just kind of to give you an idea of like how fast things get when you actually start to scale the damage. But again, that's on an endgame setup, right? That's Avatar Unbound, right? This is up in every like 4 to 6 seconds, so it's actually completely reasonable to press this. That I'm not using the haste tech where every streamer keeps mentioning this, but the haste tech where you get the marionette technology, specifically the marionettes from Ritual, I think is where they're coming from now. But basically you have 2 of them, right? And then you use Val Haste, and with the 2 corpse or with the 2 specters, what essentially happens is if you stagger them, they will have the effect of the aura up for an extended period of time, or up like 80% of the time, 90% of the time even, maybe even 100 in some cases, but nah, I don't think it's like that. But essentially it's basically going to work the exact same as Divine Blessing that just got removed. So I would absolutely use haste, right? If you don't want to do that, Val Haste is an option, but it kind of interferes with using Val Arctic Armor or Val Blade Flurry. So kind of just see where it takes us, but I know everyone is recommending this technology. I am personally, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it, right? It's adding a bit more damage, but it's like 10% more damage, which is okay, right? It's decent, right? I'm not going to say that you shouldn't do it, right? 10% more damage is still 10% more damage. It's better than nothing, but I'm not going to tell you that it's required in order to play the build, right? That's not really fair, right? I think it's a bit gimmicky as well. So you either use it or you don't. That's up to you. As far as what this build can do, it's not really a map blaster unless you want to play Charge Dash, which actually has a lot of burst damage. It doesn't have a crazy screen clearing power or anything like that, but Charge Dash is definitely an option for instead of Blade Flurry. Obviously, you lose Val Blade Flurry, but again, Val Arctic Armor is a decent replacement. In general, I think that Charge Dash is a bit clunky to use. It's kind of memey. However, Charge Dash does actually have really good damage. Charge Dash, the way it works is the same way as like charging and releasing the ability. However, Charge Dash has this release thing, and it goes up to 15 stacks, which you stack very quickly. And actually, like in a release, right, it's this number times the hit rate, right? So between 3 and 4 hits, but that much damage on a release is pretty good on the low budget, right? So just to quickly like show you Charge Dash, right, just to give you an idea of what's happening with the skill. Charge Dash like is a bit gimmicky. It's okay, right? It's not bad by any means, right? But it's a bit gimmicky, and because of that, I probably won't really recommend it. Small lag spike there, right? I think like if you want to play with it, you can, absolutely. It works in the build pretty well, but I don't think it's anything like too crazy. Right? Ultimately, like it's ultimately like okay at the way it clears. Also, I just realized I have like way less mana for some weird reason. So that's why my thing is activating early, because my mana is a bit poor. Like it moves pretty fast, but like it's kind of inconsistent in its damage and also really jarring, especially when you're on like lower mana amounts. If you're not hitting right away, it's proccing almost instantly, which is kind of bad, right? If you're actually hitting a target, you're actually like getting mana leech back in it, and you are out regenning it. But like you can like see here, like I'm on a single target, and because I'm on a single target, I'm not really getting the same amount of mana back. And also like because of how jarring it is, it's not like the craziest in terms of damage, right? It's okay, right? It's nothing crazy though. It's okay. In reality, it might not be the greatest thing to use, but that's just kind of a little showcase of charge dash. Maybe that will be useful. But in terms of like what this build can do content wise, it probably doesn't do simulacrums all too well. It does it okay, right? I shouldn't say it's bad at it. It's okay at it. You can take a good amount of hits, right? Especially if you're reducing them and you have an insane amount of dodge, which is really good for clumps of enemies, right? I don't think it's bad by any means, but I don't think it's like gonna turn heads. It might be a bit doable with a amethyst flask, right? I don't think it's really all that crazy, but amethyst flask is probably the best way to go with it if you're gonna do simulacrums. It doesn't have screen popping power or anything like that. It doesn't have any like percent health explosions, so take with that what you will. It's very good at bossing though. Very, very good at doing rotations of guardian invitations and actual bosses, which is really good. It's also good at harvest and decent at expeditions. I think it handles the league mechanic pretty well since it's similar to a Crucible league mechanic where you're kind of just standing and hitting, right? Ritual and essences are going to be easy for a build like this as well. Ultimatum is going to be kind of hard because Ultimatum has ruin, and ruin is really, really hard to deal with for most builds, especially when you're not moving. My plan is to rush T17s to farm stuff to sell to other players. I enjoy boss rushing a lot and farming boss drops. I enjoy practicing the boss mechanics, so that's my plan. I'll probably do a little bit of ritual. I'm definitely going to do syndicate for the crafts because you kind of need them. I might do essences, I might not, it kind of depends. But ritual looks really interesting with the corpses. Getting those new corpses is going to feel pretty nice, especially the corpses that like have the auras, right? You can get a pretty solid amount of extra damage from it. Like you can probably drop wrath if you can get that corpse that gives wrath and use something else. I don't know, but we'll see kind of what happens. Unfortunately, since I am using unique items, I won't be able to take part in the rune forging stuff, right? That's really unfortunate. I wanted to use the rune forging stuff. Maybe if there's like something crazy on like a body armor, because there is the body armor like this that has the attack speed per 25 dexterity, right? Really high end game option. I've heard you can get these for like 3 divine, like non-fractured, right? The non-fractured attack speed per 25 dex. I've like 3 divines I've heard. I don't know how true that is, but that does exist, right? But this was bought for like 15 divines, right? And this was because like actually double fracturing was possible in Necropolis. That's not gonna be a thing anymore, so I don't expect to get gear like this again. But at least this gear is decent, and you can still get the attack speed for 25 dex, which is absolutely the better way to go for scaling your damage, right? It gives you an insane amount of attack speed going that route. So that's kind of the idea that I'm going for there. Dex stacking gear is not crazy expensive early either, right? It's decently expensive, right? You'll want to like know how to make money. And there's a lot of guides out there that will show you how to make money, so I'm not going to get into what that is going to entail. I just know my plan is to boss rush. That's kind of what I'm expecting to do. If your plan is to boss rush, this build could be good, could feel pretty nice. What's extremely nice though is if the build ends up being really bad or really bait, you can still go and play Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike is going to be probably really strong as Warden, and also you're right next to the piercing nodes, right? You're right next to this extra projectile attack speed node, right? You still are able to reach out and grab this stuff pretty easily. You're playing a claw build already, so again, like you're pretty set, right? You'll have an insane amount of damage going into Lightning Strike, and you'll feel really, really good if you play it. Since it's not the most squishy, but it's also not the most tanky, right? Overall, this build has been extremely fun to test, right? I'm excited for the new league, and I'm especially excited for actual good currency trading for once, like for the first time ever. But if you want to take a look at this build further and like see my progression, see how I'll be doing, you can find me at twitch.tv, Orion's Not an Onion. It'll be in the description if you want to take a look at it. Or I'll put it in the comments, one of the two. And you can follow for more progression to see how this goes. This is my first time making a build and showing it off, so I apologize in advance if the information isn't as in-depth as you're looking for. I'm making build diary updates on YouTube every week and streaming regularly to show out the progress, so if you want to see more, please follow or subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. This is gonna be interesting. Let's see what happens. Yeah, like this damage is very mediocre. I want to take a hit and just like see. Oh, you can just face tank it. Okay. In the other POB, you actually also have a lot more. In the other POB, I forgot to mute my Discord. In the other POB, I have a lot more just damage reduction in general. Honestly, there's no point in me even sitting here walking around. I want to take this. Oh, that didn't do any damage. If you're this tanky, okay, this is gonna be so easy next league. This isn't even gonna be close. This is the easiest kill next league. I just skipped over that one. That didn't even take out my energy shield. I want to tank this. That almost killed me. You are gonna have way more damage reduction going into next league. If I'm sitting here tanking, I'm not even using the Blade Flurry. I pressed it once on accident, but I didn't press it long enough to matter. Yeah, this is gonna be stupid easy. Let's tank this. I just full force tank. I didn't even use Blade Flurry. If I'm able to tank the one shots and whatnot, next league is gonna be so easy for defensives, right? I'm not even using my flash that well. If you're sitting there dodging things, this would be an easy fight, right? This is again on a 5-link with 3 to 5 times less damage, right? I have in the POB I have the 6-link thing, but honestly, I'm not even activating Blood Rage for more attack speed. I'm getting messages on Discord. Let's tank this again. So that's how I use Blade Flurry. But honestly, Blade Flurry is probably like the better gem to use. Let's go ahead and finish this. Wow, they're all over there. I'm actually going to activate Blood Rage now. But like, if your dodge rating is at the point where you're able to just sit there and full force face tank this guy, it's pretty nice. In general, I think this is probably the best way that going into next league. I think this is probably like the best, one of the stronger builds. Like again, no Blade Flurry. Just to reiterate, I tank the one shot blast too. I outright like this is pretty good. This guy just inescapably doomed at the very end. I forgot to Culling Strike him. Try not to die to drowning while I'm doing this. That'd be really embarrassing. You're gonna be taking way less damage. You're gonna be doing 3 to 5 times more damage, right? This is gonna be like easy Void Stones, right? Because Void Stones don't have anything. That's why I'm doing this. Can I Culling Strike this guy? No, he's almost there. I'm trying to Culling Strike him. There we go. Pretty simple stuff. Like you'll 100% be able to do everything. Like again, on a 5-link, I didn't even activate Blood Rage all the time. I barely used my flask properly. I tanked everything. You'll be able to get your Void Stones done easily. So super excited. Hope you enjoy the build.